Hello everyone, this is Vikram and welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to understand AWS EC2 Service. These are the various topics we are going to cover in this video. We'll start with what is EC2 Service in AWS, various instance types, Amazon machine image, what is IP address, the difference between IPv4 and IPv6, what is the use of port number, DNS, what are security groups in AWS, what is SSH and public key authentication, and how to set up passwordless authentication. We are going to understand how to SSH into EC2 instances using command line, and also we'll understand how to use MobaXterm as an SSH tool by installing MobaXterm on Windows. So this video is already recorded earlier, so I'm going to join various topics in this video. If you are already aware of EC2 instance service and how to create an EC2 instance, so you can skip this video and proceed to the next video. How to create EC2 instances, what is an EC2 instance, and all the relevant topics around EC2, like what is an IP address, what is a port number, right? What is a security group in EC2 instances, what exactly is an EC2 instance, how do you start it, and then how do you log in into the EC2 instance. Okay, all those things will be covered today, right? So if you already installed, created AWS account, and once you log in, okay, so basically this is your AWS console page, right? So this is the starting page. So if you see any other page, you can just click on the AWS icon. So this will bring you back to the AWS console homepage. Okay, so UI interface will be in case if you are using older UI, so it will be different, and this is the latest UI actually. Okay, and one more thing here, you can create resources according to the region wise. So for now I selected Mumbai region, which is AP South one. Okay, so what are these regions, what are availability zones, etc., will be discussed clearly in AWS sessions, but make sure that you select a region which is very near to you. Okay, of course you can select any region, but since I'm in India, I'm selecting AP South one. Okay, and this is your login ID, and all the sign out button and billing dashboards, everything you can see, right? And this is a console. Basically we don't use it, so this is a cloud shell, so it will open exactly the shell that you see in Linux machines. So this also we don't need. Okay, and there are a lot of AWS services. Okay, so I'm not going to teach any of these for now, right? And so if you see this compute service, so this is the only service that we are going to use before Linux. If you click on this compute service, you can see EC2 is one service, which is virtual servers inside the cloud, right? So this is the only service we use, and apart from that we use some other services like IAM and all, which I'm going to teach, right? And also you can search for a specific service by directly typing in the search bar. Okay, so this is EC2. So this is the first service that we are going to start, right? Any questions? And if you have any questions, kindly stop me. Okay, so don't hesitate, right? Shall we start?
Vikram, one question. So, are we going along with AWS and Linux, or just a set up an
It's just
EC2
a
instance
Linux.
and
Correct,
okay,
it's just an EC2 instance to practice Linux. But
okay,
remember, AWS will be covered in all the tools. So whatever tool that we learn, we use AWS services.
yeah,
Okay,
sure,
but
makes
AWS
sense.
services will be taught dedicatedly at the end, along with Terraform. Okay,
Okay, thanks. Yeah,
so first thing we need to understand is what is this EC2 service. Okay, so highly suggest you to go through EC2 documentation. So you can just type for EC2 documentation, and you can only select the ones which are from AWS to understand what is this EC2. Okay, so EC2 stands for Elastic Cloud Compute. Okay, so it is cloud VMs, so you can create VMs directly in the cloud. So whenever you require, and whenever you're done with those VMs, okay, that is a virtual machine, you can actually destroy them or else you can stop them. Okay, so when these EC2 instances are in stopped mode, you will not be charged. Okay, so this is basic information. I hope everyone knows already, but since most of the members are freshers, so I'm clearing that again. Okay, and this is called elastic because once you create VM, you can extend its size, you can change its type, etc. So that's why it is called elastic. Okay, and yeah, so that is about EC2. So these are the cloud instances. So these are exactly like our instances, I mean like our machines, but we don't control them. Okay, so if you want to create any such environments locally, okay, so you can also use VirtualBox. Okay, so VirtualBox, I don't think I have VirtualBox installed. Okay, so inside the VirtualBox also you can create instances. Okay, now let's understand what is EC2 instance and how to use it, and also some basic networking concepts like IP, port, what is a socket, DNS, how do you SSH, right? Okay, so what is EC2 instance? So first of all, EC2 is the most used services in AWS. Okay, because it is a VM, it's a virtual machine. Okay, so what is a virtual machine? Anyone? So it's a
Uh,
machine existing virtually somewhere, right? So somewhere in the sense it is available inside the data centers. Okay, so we call it as cloud. Okay, so inside the cloud services provider, we create VMs. Okay, so this is exactly like our CPU. Okay, so with a dedicated RAM, CPU resources, and then an operating system running. Correct? It's virtually available. Okay, so it is not available in my place. Okay, it is virtually available. So if I have to access it, so I have to remotely access this machine. Okay, through protocols such as SSH. Right? So through SSH, you log in into this system and you perform various administrative tasks, right? And these are also known as headless machines. So what is a headless machine? So machine that doesn't have any output displays. Okay, so to these machines you will not have any monitors. Okay, so there is no graphical user interface, and any sort of services that provide that graphical user interface are basically not available within this particular VM. Okay, you can only work through command line. Okay, so you can only control through command line, that is through commands, right? So first we'll see what is this EC2 instance, that is basically VM, and then how to create it. So while creating, what are the various options we have, what are the choices of operating systems we can use, and how much is the memory that you want that VM to have, how much is the CPU. Okay, clear? So these are the minimal configurations. So of course there are some VPCs and other things, but we will not see any of these now. Okay, so we'll only see what are the major things, rest we all leave to the default values. Okay, so once the VM is created and running, right, and once it is in the running state, what we'll do, we'll try to access it. Okay, let's see how to access it through SSH protocol, and we'll also see how to do SSH from MobaXterm and also from plain CLI commands using SSH library. All these things we are going to see. Okay, while doing this, we'll also understand, so what is an IP address, how many types of IP addresses are supported, what is a port number, why this is needed, what is a socket, what is a security group. Okay, how to create them, how to map them, etc. Okay, so this may be very easy for some, but some might be feeling even difficulty in understanding the terms, but the end of the session you'll understand everything. Okay, any questions?
No.
Any questions, guys? Okay. So what is an EC2 instance? So this is basically most used service in AWS because it is an VM. So anyone can create a VM, install any software, and run that application, right? So these are the virtual server instances, okay, with your own set of operating system and hardware. So you decide what operating system you wanted to run in that VM, and also it's your choice of hardware, how much CPU, how much RAM, okay, you want that VM to run. So instead of buying your own set of hardware, so we rent virtual machines inside the cloud. Okay, so these are called VMs, and as long as these are running, so they are reserved for you. Okay, and then once they run, they'll get an IP address that is dedicated for you. And once you delete that VM, that IP address will be released, and it is made available for other VMs. Okay, so in this case, you will you should get a question like, what if I need a permanent IP address? So there is also a solution for that, but see, anything that you want to have permanently will cost you. Okay, so AWS will give you free IP addresses, okay, because they can take those IP addresses when your instances are destroyed. Okay, if you want permanent IP addresses, you need to pay for that service. Okay, those are called elastic IPs. Again, this will be taught in the AWS, right? So you can launch as many EC2 instances as you like. Okay, so there is no upper limit. Okay, and also you can scale up. That means you can increase the number of instances, you can decrease the number of instances according to the user traffic. Okay, right? So let's say you have deployed an application in EC2 instance. It's a very basic application, so you're expecting only 5 to 10 users, and that particular instance um, you know is being used by only those 5 to 10 users, so there is no load. Okay, so even if you take my Windows machine, so if I run multiple applications parallelly, it will slow down, right? Then what I'll do, I'll try to close those applications, or kill them through task manager. Understood? Similarly, a VM can only handle up to a certain load. Okay, so if the load is increasing, what we need to do, so we need to increase the number of instances and share the load. Correct? Correct, guys. If I say this is one VM and initially there are only 5 to 10 users, so only the same VM can handle that load. But if it is increasing, if the load is increasing, so the applications running inside it will slow down. So in this case, what we'll do, we'll increase the VMs that run the same application. Okay, then what we will do, instead of redirecting the traffic only to one VM, what we'll do is we'll share the load across these VMs, right? Like if one user is sending the request to this VM, the other user request should be automatically forwarded to the other VM. Okay, so this way load should be distributed. But who is going to distribute this load? Okay, as an end user, okay, I cannot see how many instances are running my application, right? I mean the application. So here three instances are running, but I will not know, right? Then what you will do, you have to put a load balancer. Correct? Correct, guys? I have to have a load balancer. What is the use of load balancer?
Used to distribute the traffic between the servers.
Yeah, so it is again a service, okay, called ALB, application load balancer. So this is again a service of AWS. So what you will do is, so all the user traffic will be redirected to that load balancer only. Okay, and then this load balancer will take care of redirecting the traffic in certain fashion. Okay, so first required request it will send to VM1, second it will send to this, third it will send to this. Okay, so there are certain algorithms, okay, that ALB uses to distribute the traffic, but that is not our concern as of now. So only thing is, all the load balance, all the user requests will be forwarded to ALB, and ALB will distribute the traffic. Okay, so this is called load balancing. Okay, because we cannot do load balancing. So there should be a separate service. So this is again an AWS service. This is again an AWS service, right? Okay, so this is the advantage of VMs. And one more thing here.
Who will create that
So
load balancer, Vikram?
yes, we create it. We should
Means,
create.
means how to create that load balancer in AWS?
So that is a topic in AWS again later.
Means he will show it as a practical.
Yes, yes, but not now. It's not needed for now.
Okay.
Okay,
Means now you are just discussing
you'll
that
come to it
overall
in
picture of
AWS.
AWS.
Correct, correct. Before going into EC2.
Okay.
Understood? Okay, just I'm giving some of the basic information about the services. Okay, and the other question is, let's say, so there are 5 users, and so in initial I deployed only one VM. Okay, but as soon as the number of users increase, so I want the VMs should also scale up. Okay, but who is going to take care of that automatically, right? So I cannot create a VM manually and then attach it to load balancer, right? That's not my task. I want my AWS to automatically increase the VMs depending upon the load. Okay, so how do you achieve this? So we achieve this using uh, a topic known as auto scaling group. Okay, which we call the ASG. What is auto scaling group? So as the name itself indicates, it is automatically scaling the instances. Okay, so in the auto scaling group, what we'll do is, so we will do some configurations, like if the load reaches more than 75 percentage, that is overall load, then increase the instances to 5. Okay, so if the again the average load is again increasing or crossing again 75 percentage, I can increase the VMs by 5 more. Okay, so if the load has decreased to less than, let's say, 30%, then I'll remove 3 VMs. Again, if it is reaching on an average of less than 10%, I'll remove 4 more. Okay, see, depending upon the average load of the user traffic that is experienced by all the VMs, I'm also increasing or decreasing the VMs. Okay, clear?
Yeah, hi
Understood?
Vikram. How we know that load is 75% or 70% based on what
So
actually
that
has?
is calculated by AWS for you. Okay,
Okay,
so
if we know the
AWS
hundred
will check.
percentage of load only, they can we knows the 75 what is 75%, right?
Correct. See, internally, so every VM will have its memory and CPU usage, right?
Oh, it's based
So
on memory
those are
CPU.
called
Okay,
metrics. So
okay,
those
got it.
metrics will be calculated by AWS for you. So AWS note how much CPU and memory is being utilized by each VM. So on an average, it will calculate that percentage.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Thanks. Yeah.
So this is the overall picture of your EC2 instances, your application load balancers, auto scaling group. So for now we don't require it, but I explained so that you understand EC2 instances. Okay, so that's why I said, so you can automatically scale up or scale down instances. Okay, with the use of auto scaling group or ASG. Okay, and also it is pay as you go model. Okay, so you don't have to pay if you're not using anything. So if you have an AWS account, that doesn't mean that you're being charged. So only if you use the resources, then only you'll be charged. Okay, and also if you create any VM and if you stop that VM, okay, then your billing will also stop. Okay, clear? So only if the VM is in the running state, then only it will be charged. So of course in our free tier account, so we'll have 750 hours of free usage. Okay, so if I continuously run a VM 24 hours for 30 days, okay, so it is close to 720, right? correct? It's close to 720, which means if I continuously run a VM for 30 days, I will not be charged anything. But in most of the scenarios, you will run 4 to 5 VMs at the same time. So make sure that you stop them when you're not using them. Okay. So EC2 instances can be many types. Okay. So here I have shown 5 different families depending upon the CPUs, memory, storage requirements. Okay. So first one is general purpose. So if your task or if your use case is very general, okay, that doesn't need much CPU and memory resources, then you can go for general purpose. So they'll provide you balanced compute and memory, okay, along with network resources. So these are not very high on memory, not very high on CPU. Okay, so these are just enough to run some basic applications like web servers, code repositories. Okay, so every instance will have a code like A1, T1, T3. Inside T3 also T3 micro, T3 mini. Okay, so there are certain codes. Okay, so I'll show in the documentation. Then we have compute optimized. Okay, so where they'll have more processing power, like more CPU. Okay, so this is needed for more CPU intensive applications, and these have codes like C4, C5, like that. And some are memory optimized. Okay, so if your application needs more RAM, okay, to process more data, then you can go for memory optimized instances. Okay, then you have GPU optimized. Okay, for all GPU based operations. Okay, like graphic processing, data processing. And then you have storage optimized, where if you need high read and write access to a storage, then you can go for storage optimized. Okay, so if you go to this link from Amazon, so that describes about various EC2 instances. So you can read about general purpose, compute optimized. Okay, so you can learn more about why these are needed. Okay, how much network bandwidth you're going to get. Clear? Okay, so that is about the instance type. Mostly we'll use the minimal instances, like we'll only create instances of one virtual CPU and only 1 GB of RAM machine. So this is only allowed in free tier. Okay, so this is the only VM type that is free tier eligible. Okay, you cannot create high cannot create any what do you say, other instance types. Okay, so someone is reporting they are seeing some screen stuck and with voice lagging. So everyone is having the same issue.
No, for me it is fine.
No, it's clear for me.
Okay, okay, I think it's their issue. Okay, and as I said, AWS offers 750 hours of free instances. As I said, it is 1 GB RAM and 1 vCPU. That instance type is called T2 micro, and there are a couple of others as well, T3 micro and T2 micro. Okay, so it anyways in the UI also they'll clearly mention which of the instances are free tier supported. Okay, and if you are interested in calculating, if you want to know how much you will be charged for an instance type, okay, you can go to this website instance.vantage.sh, and then you can search for the instance and see how much you will be charged. Okay, and all that information. Okay, and so as I said, VM needs an operating system to run. So in Linux, in Amazon terminology, we call it as a AMI, which is called machine image, Amazon machine image. Okay, so this is just like your ISO file. Okay, like your Windows ISO or Linux operating system file. So we call it as an AMI. Okay, so you need to select AMI when you're creating an instance like Linux, Ubuntu, Red Hat Enterprise, or Microsoft Windows Server. Okay, in fact, Mac operating system is also there. Okay, and also choice of this operating system. Okay, the architecture, the CPU architecture. If it is an Intel architecture or it can be an ARM architecture. So depending upon the architecture, also you can choose your operating system. Okay, for someone who is working on IoT devices where their CPU architecture is ARM architecture, then they can create instances of that architecture. Okay, understood? And only some AMIs are eligible for free tier, some are the paid ones. Of course, you can also create your own AMI, that is machine image. It's like creating your own operating system. Okay, and see, when you're starting your EC2 instance, okay, you need to have that AMI to launch. And also we know that without any storage your data cannot be stored, so we call it as EBS, elastic block store. Okay, elastic block store is a volume that you give or mount to the instance. Okay, see, when you see our our system, so you'll have the C drive, D drive, right? Similarly, you'll have one drive here, okay, that is mounted to your EC2 instance, so that is called root volume. Okay, so I'll show you what is the root volume when we create instance. Okay, so this is not needed. And now let's understand what are the default accounts. So whenever we create an VM, or whenever we set up our Windows machine or Mac, so we give our user accounts, right? Like you create your own user account and then you try to log in. Similarly, when you try to create an EC2 instance, you will not be asked to create any user accounts. Okay, so of course you can create your accounts once you create a VM. Okay, but for creating a VM and after that to log in into that VM, we need some default user accounts, right? So the default user accounts are already given in AWS site also. Okay, and it depends upon the AMI that you are choosing. If you are selecting AMI Linux 2, then default username is EC2-user. Okay, and remember, password based authentication is disabled. Okay, with password you cannot log in. There is no password based login. So there is another method called passwordless authentication, that is used without using passwords you will be able to log in, that I'll show. Okay, so depending upon the AMI, okay, so the user account will differ. Okay, you need to refer the documentation, but anyways we are going to use Linux to VM only, AMI only, so the default user is EC2-user. And sometimes we'll also use Ubuntu AMI if it is needed. So in this case the default username is Ubuntu. Okay, clear? Let's say you're using AMI that is developed by someone. Okay, so if you have to know about the default user account, you can just see the who is providing that AMI in many scenarios, so they'll provide that information in the documentation itself. Right, clear guys? Any questions?
No.
Okay, so once you create your AMI and once it is in the running state, so the next thing is to SSH into that VM, right? So you need to log in into that VM. But for login, what all things we need? Hmm? So for understanding this, okay, so let's understand how do we identify resources on the internet. Okay, so how do you identify resources on the internet?
through the IP
How do you access
address.
various website?
By
So it
domain
is
name.
through IP address or the domain name. Okay, so there is a difference between the domain name and IP address. Okay, again we will talk more about this in future sessions also. Okay, so domain name is the name given to an IP address. Okay, so if I just say this is the domain name, so there will be a IP address that is mapped to this domain name. Okay, so the reason why we are using names is the IP addresses are hard to remember, and in fact if the application is migrated to different instances or the VM, its IP will also change. So accordingly the entries, okay, that is your name to IP mapping will also be changed. Okay, your name will not be changed, only the name will be constant. Sorry, the name will be constant and IP address will be changed according to the VM. Okay, So this is called DNS system. Okay, so where we use names for the IP addresses, and this entry is known as DNS entries. Okay, so each entry will have name and its associated IP address. Okay, so this IP address can be IPv4 or IPv6. Again, I'll talk about this in some time. Okay, so using IP addresses or the domain names, okay, you can identify a resource. It can be a website, it can be an application running somewhere. Okay, so it can be either through IP or DNS. But here, so DNS is not, something that you will manage. Okay, so there are certain DNS servers. So inside the DNS servers, you have the DNS entries, that is name and IP. Okay, so for most of the scenarios, so this name and IP address are mostly constant, and this is not a free service, so you'll have to pay for this. Okay, so it's a reason why, if you don't have the DNS yet, okay, you can rely on the IP address. So using only IP address, you can basically talk to any resource. Okay, if there is one application running somewhere in Europe, okay, and there is one more application running in Asia. Okay, so these applications are running in some VM. Okay, so both can talk over their IP addresses. And what sort of IP addresses? It is only public IP addresses. Okay, let's see what is this public IP, again what is private IP. So why we are discussing both these IP address now. Okay, so first let's understand what is IP address. So this is basically this is the 32-bit address assigned to any device that is connected to a network. Okay, so if the device is not connected to the network, so an IP address will not be given or assigned to that system. Okay, using only IP address, we can talk to various devices on the internet. Okay, and remember, every IP address should be unique so that we can uniquely identify a resource on the internet. You cannot have same IP address for two different devices. Okay, and if you want to see the IP address of your machine, okay, so what command you will run? In Windows it is ipconfig. Okay, if you see, this is my IP address, but this is the local IP address, right? So in Linux, you can either do IPA, or you can also do ifconfig. It is ifconfig. So ifconfig is not recognized in a Windows system because it is a Linux command. Okay, and in Linux, you can also run hostname -i. Okay, so this will also show the IP address of that particular VM. Okay, and if you see the IPv4 part, okay, so it will have 32 bits. Okay, so these 32 bits are divided into four different parts, and each part is known as octet. Okay, so an octet will have 8 bits. Okay, so there are 32, it is a 32-bit address. Then what is IPv6? So why we are even talking about IPv4? Okay, so as you see, IPv4 consists of 32-bit, okay, or 4 byte, because 1 byte is 8 bits. Okay, so if you see this IPv4 address, so each octet can be represented by 8 bits, so total of 32 bit. And how many maximum combinations that you can have? So let's say I have only one place that I can fill with a bit. Okay, so that can be either 0 or 1. So how many combinations I can do? Hmm? Guys,
2 power
I can
32.
put, no, it's only one place, it is 2 power 1, that is 2. Either it is 0 or 1, right? Similarly, if there are 32 places, I can have maximum of 202 power 32. Okay, that means only 2 power 32 IPv4 addresses are unique. Okay, clear? Understood, guys?
Yes, clear.
So this 2 power 32 is a very small number, especially when you consider so many devices are now connected to the internet. So there are some IoT devices, some small industrial devices, large computing devices. So 2 power 32 is very small number. So if it is very small number, then how do you assign a unique IP address to each device? It is practically not possible. Okay. So there are other concepts like natting and all that takes care of converting private IPs to public IP addresses, which is beyond the scope of this lecture. But still 2 power 32 is very small number. Okay. And also the available IPv4 addresses are now depleted. Okay. So we don't have any IPv4 addresses. So we need a way of having large number of IP pool. Okay. So IP pool in the sense the total number of IP addresses available, we call it as pool, IP pool. Okay. So that's the reason we have IPv6, that is version 6 of internet protocol, which will have 128 bits.
We don't use
Okay.
class. We don't use class D or E. Then.
Yeah, so classes and all, as I said, it's not needed for now. But if you see, all 2 power 32 comes under those 4 classes. Okay.
Hmm.
So 2 power, this IPv6 now consists of 128 bits, which is 2 power 128. 2 power 22 is practically very large number. Okay. And it is now broken into 8 parts. Okay. So this is IPv6, and each part is represented with 16 bits or 2 byte. Okay, which starts from 0000 and set FFFF. Okay, so this is hexadecimal system, right? The other one is a decimal system. Understood? So 2 power 32 is practically very large. And also see, currently, um, if you have to use IPv6, your application should also support IPv6. Okay, it's not that you simply use IPv6 for your application. So if it is not supporting, then it cannot work on IPv6. Understood? Okay. Yeah. So in order to find your IP, so it is IP config in case of Windows, or it can be IF config in case of Linux. Anyways, in Linux, I'm going to show you how the output looks like. Okay. Now we have 3 different types of IP addresses. One is the public IP, the other one is the private IP, the third one is elastic IP. Okay. So what is this public IP? Hmm? What is this public IP?
IP that's is publicly, I
So
guess.
this is the IP that is publicly available. Okay.
Yeah.
So which means a device with public IP can be accessed from anywhere. Okay. Understood? Okay. It is like if you take the case of a home. Okay. So let's say, a thing, it can be, let's say, it can be a simple thing that is kept outside your home. Okay. So anyone can see it and anyone can access it. So it is publicly available. Okay. So if I have to give a public IP to any VM, okay. So if I have to have that IP permanently, that is going to, AWS is going to charge me. But once you create a VM, AWS is going to assign a free public IP for you. Okay. This IP will be assigned to this VM as long as your VM is running. Okay. And remember, if you stop your VM and restart, this public IP is going to change. Okay. That is public IP. So anyone can reach from anywhere. Then what is this elastic IP? So elastic IP is also a public IP, but that IP will be assigned for you. Okay. Permanently. I mean, until you release it, so it will be assigned to you. and since it is assigned dedicatedly for you, you're going to be charged for having that public IP assigned for you. Okay, because as I said, IPs are not free. Okay, and also we have limited IPs. Okay, so AWS is going to charge you if you want that IP, but anyways we are going to use that. Okay, understood. So what is the disadvantage of using this public IP? So I cannot say it is a disadvantage. So let's say this VM is there in some Europe region. Okay, and then this is in the Asia region, some VM. Okay, this some VM also have some public IP. So in order for this VM to talk to this VM over the internet through the public IP, okay, so there will be a lot of delays, right? Okay, because this network, these network packets has to travel, very long distance to reach the other VM, right?
Yeah.
Understood? So
Yes.
AWS also gives you a different IP called private IP. Okay. So what is this private IP? So private IP are private to your instances. Okay. So no one can access it from outside. Okay. So if I have a VM with private IP from my local machine, from my home, I cannot access that VM which is running in AWS because it is public. Sorry, it is private. So how do I access it? So those can be accessed from within the same IP. Okay, so let's say if I have one device inside my home. Okay, so there is one more device inside the same home. So these two devices can have private IPs. Okay, so that these can talk to each other over a very dedicated network. Okay, so these two devices are, since they're internally available and they can easily talk to each other through their private network. So there is no point in going outside internet and reaching the other device using their public IP. Okay. So it is like I'm making a call even though I'm in the same house. Instead of directly going and talking, I'm making a phone call. Making a phone call is like making it through communicating through public. So having direct communication, it is through communicating through private IP. Okay, so if you have multiple AWS resources, okay, so there is one EC2 instance and there is one more EC2 instance. Okay, so instead of communicating through public, it is better to communicate with their private IPs. One advantage with this private IPs is as soon as your instance is created, a private IP is assigned to it, and even though your instance is stopped, okay, these private IPs are not released. That means these private IPs will be permanently assigned to the EC2 instances as long as you own them. Only when you destroy them or permanently remove them, then these private IPs will be released. Okay, so you can be very sure that even if you stop these instances, okay, and once you restart them, they can still communicate with each other because there is no change in the IP addresses. Okay, it is like you have a Wi-Fi router and then it has some ID and then password available. You connected from your mobile phone to this Wi-Fi router. So if I turn off this Wi-Fi router and then turn it on, so will it change the SSID and password? No, right? When the Wi-Fi router is up again, my mobile will automatically connect to it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it is like this. So this is the private IP. So communicating through private IPs are much faster. Okay, because they have their own dedicated networking for that. Okay, then what is a port number? Okay, so this we see it in almost all the DevOps tools. So without knowledge of port number, without knowledge of IP address, you cannot call yourself as a DevOps engineer. Okay, so this port number is very important while setting up applications, while accessing, okay, in order to communicate effectively with your IT team. Okay, if someone asks you on what port number your application is listening on, you should be able to answer it. Then what is this port number? Okay, so before understanding port number, let's take a very small example. Okay, so the example is Okay, so I need to send a letter. Okay, so from one destination to another destination. So how do I send that letter? Maybe across cities or across countries. Okay, so there is this place one and this is some place two. Okay, so I need to send a letter. So in our case you can take it as it's a simple data. So what all information that one needs to effectively send the data to two. Okay,
Yeah.
what do I need?
Address.
It's an address. So address in the sense we know that it is basically an IP address. Okay, because we don't have any physical address, right? It is only through IP address I can uniquely as identify this number two. Okay, clear?
What about MAC address?
Okay, so MAC address is different. Okay, so MAC address is for identifying through MAC address, but IP address is through communicating through layer 3 protocol. Okay, so it is IP
Yeah,
address. So MAC we don't
it
need
will.
it now.
It is for NIC, right? Yeah,
It is layer 2 protocol.
yeah.
Okay, so IP address. Okay, so that's fine. Okay, you have the IP address. Okay, so one can easily talk to the IP address. Okay, so IP address is the only thing. But if you take the letter analogy, okay, so what are the various things I need? So first is the name. Okay, but name is not mandatory. Okay, so what are the other things that are mandatory? So one is the country, the other one is the state, next probably district, right? And then street information. So I'm clubbing everything as one unit. Okay, so I'm taking this as an IP address. Okay, but so if I just have the address till street, so will my letter be delivered to the other person exactly? No, right? Because a street can have multiple homes, correct? So how do I give this door number? It is through port.
Port.
Okay, if you take the case of your networking analogy. Okay, so there is this VM, so there is this application. Okay, sorry, this VM, so it is running lot of applications. Okay, so you cannot use a VM only for a single task. Okay, so I have a web server running, probably a mail server running, or simply it can be an application. Okay, similarly there is another VM which is there in the okay other machine. Okay, so this will also run lot of things, right? Like web server, it can also run web server, it can also run mail server, it can also run SSH server. These are all different application. Okay, now I want this application here. Okay, this application to talk to the SSH application. Okay, understood?
Yeah.
So this VM has an IP, this VM also has an IP. Okay, so I'm restricted to only talk to the IP address. Okay, that means this VM can talk to this VM and the connection ends at this point, at this barrier. Okay, then how do my application, the request, will reach a specific service within that VM, right? That is called port. Every application, okay, will have a port number. This will have 80, this may have some other port, this may have 22 as the port. So this port number, these port numbers are standard. Okay, there are some standard ports. So you can use the standard ports, or you can of course change them for any security reasons. Okay, but every application should have this port number. Okay, so this port number uniquely identifies a particular application within the VM, so that when this application has to talk to this SSH, so it will use both IP of this particular VM colon the port number, that is 22. This is called a socket. Okay, with IP and port combination is called a socket, but you don't have to remember it. IP colon first IP will send the traffic to this particular IP. So port number will forward that particular request to this SSH. Okay, understood.
Yeah.
Clear, guys?
Yeah.
So that is the advantage of having the port number. Now this application, if it wants to talk to the web server, so it should use IP colon the port number is 80. Then the communication will be established to the correct application. At the same time, you cannot have same port assigned to two different applications. You will get an error. Okay, if 80 is assigned or already to web server, you cannot create one more web server with the same 80 port. You should run it on some other port 81 or anything else which is available in the machine. Okay, understood?
For yeah, Vikrama, for different virtual machines, we can have same port numbers, so we
Yeah,
can
yeah.
connect the application to
Across
the
the
server.
virtual numbers, correct. Across the VMs, you can have same ports. Okay, so usually for security reasons, what we will do is, so for this VM, even though it is running some applications like important applications like on 80.663.22, so by default none of the ports are accessible for you. Okay, so what the security team will do, security team through firewall rules, so basically they will block all the incoming connections, so all the incoming connections will be blocked. Okay, so now what you have to do, you have to talk to your IT team and then ask them to unlock the port 80. That means open the flow between this VM to this VM on 80 port. That means what they'll do, so they'll simply allow the 80 port. Okay, and then rest of the ports will be blocked. That means from this VM, even though if you try to access this mail application on 663, your requests are denied because the connections are not established. Okay, so that's why knowing your application port is also necessary, so that you can ask your team, I mean IT team, to unblock that particular port. See, unblocking the port means here they're not stopping you at the VM level, and the VM level your application is running, but your application is not accessible by other VMs or by other users. Okay, so if there is a user, okay, so if he is reporting that he is unable to use SSH application on port 22, which means SSH server is not running. It is running. Only thing is his requests are not getting forwarded. Somewhere there is a firewall which is blocking that request from reaching this particular VM. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So you need to understand this, basic debugging also. Okay. So like you need to understand whether the service is down or you're not allowed to communicate. Okay, so you'll be getting relevant messages also in the terminal. Okay, clear? So that is how your port numbers are used. So for every application there is a port number to uniquely identify that particular application within the host. Okay, understood. So if you see your popular these sites, okay, basically there is this padlock, right? So it is saying connection is secure. Okay, so if you double click on this, you will see this HTTPS. Okay, so what is this HTTPS? It is a protocol. Okay, so even this HTTPS has a port call 443. Okay, so if I use colon 443 at the end of this URL, and if I just remove HTTPS, Okay, it will redirect it to 443 only. I mean HTTPS, because that is the common port number. So if I just remove that and if I try to access my AWS on 80, okay, so it may redirect it to 443 depending upon the configuration, or sometimes that 80 will not be served. Okay, understood? Clear, guys? So I can also enter the 8.8.8 IP address, which is see Google DNS. I think I cannot access it like this. Let's say 4.4.4. Even this also I cannot access. Okay, understood, is? So that is the port number. So you need to understand the port number, because so going forward you will install a lot of applications like Nexus, SonarQube, Apache Tomcat. Okay, even when you're setting up Kubernetes clusters, each component of Kubernetes cluster runs on a specific port. Okay, so for that, port information is needed. Okay, yeah, so if you see, so there is this server on the right hand side. I have a server which is running 3 different applications. Okay, so one is DNS server, which is listening on 53, FTP server listening on 21, web server listening on 80. Okay, so as a user, so if I have to talk to the FTP server, okay, so what I need to do, so I need to use a client tools. This is not needed basically. So what I can do is I can just talk to the FTP server, and that to destination is 21 port. Okay, because 21 is the port number. Okay, and if you want to know what are the ports that your applications are using, okay, so you can use netstat -a. Again, this is a Linux command which we will see in the Linux sessions. Okay, if you run netstat -a, you will see the port numbers like this: colon 53188. Okay, so these are all the port numbers. So you can also identify what port number your application is running on. So of course, through documentation also, you will get to know, okay, on what port that the application runs by default, right? And then we have domain name system, as we already discussed. What is domain naming system? So what is domain naming system? So it is a way of assigning names to IP addresses, because we are better at remembering names. Okay, because we will have difficulty in understanding the IP addresses, because we access so many applications. So remembering IP of each application is not possible. So we need to map up a specific name to an IP address, so that every time when you basically type that name in the browser, so it will be converted into an IP address. Okay, and um, what do you say? Um, so you'll be able to access the application. Okay, so because directly using google.com, it will not resolve to anything. It will not actually point to your actual application. So first your browser will fetch the IP address that is mapped to this name, then only your Google homepage is served. Okay, so if you want to know how this DNS works, okay, anyways we will discuss it later. Okay, so you can use this website. So this is how DNS stuff works. So you can just go through this, how DNS works. Okay, what is a domain naming system? Okay, so what will happen once you enter that name, how your name is resolved into IP address. Okay, so what is a domain? Okay, so everything you can okay, and there is one more called DNS dot. Yeah, so this one, how DNS dot works. Okay, so again, if you start reading this, you will understand. Okay, so what will happen if the website is unknown? Okay, so that is HTTP. Okay, so there is no S, so this is not a secure website. So what will happen if you use unsecured website? Okay, so how do you secure it? Okay, so once you enter this name, how DNS dot works, how this is getting resolved to the IP address. Okay, so what uh, your browser uses to get that IP address. Okay, see here the data goes to various servers to get that IP address. Okay, so it's not very easy. So at the last you're going to get the IP address and your browser is going to get the IP address. So once your browser gets the IP address, then only see here, so browser got the IP address somehow. So the browser will now um, basically um, talk to that website. Okay, so those two websites you can refer for DNS. Okay, and also there is a utility called ns lookup. Okay, so if I just use ns lookup in my Windows machine, like ns lookup, so this is called name server lookup. So if I just type for how DNS dot work, so this is the website name. If I use ns lookup, so this is going to query the all the name servers and see this is the IP address that I got. Okay, so if I try to use this IP address, okay, see it is not allowing. Okay, so maybe through IP addresses it is not taking the request, only if someone enters the name. Okay, let me use HTTPS also. Let's see whether HTTPS works or not. Now, this is not working. Okay, so basically you can just get the IP address of that domain. Okay, so it is up to the application developer whether to allow his application on the IP or simply on the name. Okay, so there are a lot of configurations you can actually do. Okay, so if you don't want your users to directly access your application on IP address, you can restrict that behavior. So in that case they can only access using the DNS name. Okay, clear guys? Any questions? Okay, similarly if you DNS lookup, it is ns lookup google.com, I think Google will allow. So this is the IPv4 address and this is the IPv6 address. Okay, so let me take this IPv4 address, and then if I try to use that IP address, if you see it is redirected to Google page. Okay, so in the backend also it works in the same way. So if you enter this google.com and if you press enter, so within some seconds your DNS will be resolved. Okay, your browser will get the IP address and then it will go to that Google web server. Clear? Any questions guys? Any questions?
No.
Vikram, there is a no practical session on for this.
Sorry,
Is there any practical session on this? Whatever we
on
discussed.
which practical session? I didn't get to. So we are just discussing the theory part, right?
No, I'm asking that we are discussing that public key, private key, and everything.
Yeah,
But
that is
use
there.
case,
That is there. That is there. So tomorrow it will come.
and tomorrow
Okay,
you will
so
discuss
this one you're
about
talking,
that. Yeah,
this one, right? Authentication part, SSH.
correct.
Yeah, yeah, I'll come.
And so
I'll come.
my question is that Linux commands and everything you will discuss as a practical, correct?
Correct, correct. See, this is just a basic class. Without this
Okay,
knowledge, you cannot proceed to any other topics. Okay, so everything is practical. Okay.
okay.
Now let's understand how to create EC2 instances before talking about SSH and understanding security groups. Okay, but let me briefly explain about what is this security group. Okay, because this is needed. Okay, see, security group is what I already discussed. So when you create a VM, so that VM might run a lot of applications. Okay, so the default applications. So if you see, this is EC2 instance that we just created. Okay, so this one doesn't have any display. So in order to talk to this VM, as I said, I can only SSH. By default, SSH runs on a port known as 22. Okay, the application runs on 22. So if there are any other applications, so they might run on different port numbers. Okay, but SSH port is 22. So if you don't allow that SSH port 22, okay, if you don't allow that SSH traffic, so no one will be able to log in into the VM. Okay, so this particular firewall which will block access to certain applications, so this is called as a security group. Okay, so what is a security group is this will define what all ports are allowed and what all IP addresses are allowed to your machine. So by default, port 22 is allowed because without 22, no one will be able to SSH. Okay, but what if I run another application that runs on 80? Okay, so if I start any application on 80, and if someone tries to access that application on port 80, by default that request will be blocked. The reason is that particular port is not allowed in the security group. So you need to open that port also in the security group so that any request on port 80 will pass through that security group and reach your server. Okay. So all these incoming sort of requests are incoming. So if this EC2 instance, if it has to talk to any other service outside, so these are all called outgoing requests. Okay, so by default your EC2 instance will can talk to any service outside the internet. So all the outgoing requests are open, so there is no restriction, but only incoming requests are blocked. But by default port 22 is opened. Okay, so if you look at the rules, so these are called inbound and outbound rules. Okay, so by default all inbound traffic is blocked for your instance except for 22. Okay, but all outgoing traffic is allowed. Okay, but you can restrict outbound traffic. That means you can completely block outbound traffic. At the same time, you can completely block the incoming traffic. So in that case, your VM is completely isolated. No one can access it except for you. Okay, so that is security groups. Okay, so we'll talk about now how to create an instance. So once you are comfortable, once you are done with instance creation in the tomorrow session, so we'll talk about how many ways that we can SSH into your EC2 instance, and at the same time we'll start our Linux topics. Okay, so first thing you need to do is you need to search for EC2 instance. Okay, or else in the services in the compute you can directly click on EC2, and then you can click on these instances. If you see, I have 4 instances. Okay, but only one of them is in the running state, and also there are some volumes, there are some elastic IP. So elastic IPs are 0, so there are 0 load balances. I have created 54 security groups. Okay, so this is some of the some of the resources which I am using. So in order to create a new EC2 instance, okay, so you can just click on launch instances, right, and then click on launch instance. So this is the EC2 instance creation page. Actually this is the latest one. So this is the latest UI. Sometimes you'll also get the older UIs. Okay, so first thing is I have to name. Okay, so if I just give a name, I'll say that I wanted to practice this Linux, so I'm just naming it as Linux. And then tags, so I'll come to tags later. Okay, um, so let me talk about tags. Okay, let's assume you have 100 instances. Okay, and then you got a bill for these 100 instances. So let's say you got some 900 US dollars as the bill, right? So now by looking at the bill, you will not understand how many instances are actually using or consuming more resources. Okay, because you're not identifying these resources with any extra data. All instances are same according to you. Okay, so you will not understand which instances are actually consuming more data, or it is responsible for getting build more. So in order to segregate resources or segregate instances, what we will do is we'll use something known as tags. Okay, what I'll do is, so when I create instances, I'll also use tags. So if I create first instance, I'll create a tag that this belongs to environment, belongs to test environment. This is a tag. Second instance, once I create, I'll assign different tag that environment is equal to production. Similarly, I'll have 10 VMs with this tag, 20 VMs with this tag. Now I can filter out VMs depending upon these tags and understand my billing, like which VMs are consuming more or which VMs are not being utilized properly. So that data I can find out by these tags. So these are called metadata. These are like giving a common names to set of machines. Okay, so let's say 5 machines I wanted to dedicate for IoT project. So I will use a different tags called prod is equal to IoT. Sorry, uh, mm, business unit is equal to IoT. Let's say so all these 5 units will have this name. Okay, so individually VMs will have name, but this is a tag. Okay, so you know what is a metadata? What is a metadata?
Information about particular
Yeah,
file, or information about the data.
it is a data of a data or data about a data. Okay, so there is a data, so it's giving more information to identify that data in form of extra data. Okay, that is called as a metadata. So metadata doesn't affect your instances, doesn't affect your application in any way. It is just a data of a data. Even if you don't give it, that is completely fine. Similarly, tags are metadata. So if I add tags, see here it is giving me option to add key and a value. Okay, so here whenever you name an instance, automatically a default tag will be created called a name and the whatever is the name you have used. So if I have to add another name, okay, I'll say that the business unit BU, this belongs to something known as IoT. Okay, so this is a tag. Okay, now there are two tags. Okay, it's a metadata. Now select the OS, which is also known as AMI. Okay, if you see, we have Linux, Mac OS, Ubuntu. Okay, there are a lot of things. But how do you identify which one is free tier eligible? Okay, so if you look at the drop down, okay, once if I select this Linux, and if I see the various types, so as I already said, okay, so they're memory optimized, CPU optimized, storage optimized. Okay, so only these are free tier eligible. Okay, so one we have Amazon Linux 2 VM, and we have this one Amazon Linux 2 with a .NET install and some other variants. Okay, so if you look at the Mac OS, so in Mac OS I don't think there will be a free tier version. See, there is no free tier version because the OS itself is very premium and costly, so there won't be any free tier eligible. But in case of Ubuntu, you will have two types of free tier versions. Okay, so mostly what we are going to do is we are going to use only what do you say, this Amazon Linux only. Okay, so I'll also explain why Amazon Linux is preferred later. So in Amazon Linux, which one I'll prefer is this AMI Linux 2 kernel 5.10. Okay, this is free tier eligible. Okay, so by default it is 64-bit x86. Okay, instance type, yeah. Now key pair. Okay, so remember this key pair. Okay, so what is this key pair? So in order to access your VM, okay, as I already said, you will not have any passwords. So you will only have the keys. Okay, so you can either create a new key, okay, and then use that key. Okay, so what Amazon will do is, so Amazon will lock your EC2 instance with a lock. They'll give you a key to you. Okay, or else if you have already created keys before, you're going to use the existing one. So if you see, I already have the existing ones. Okay. So if you have to create a new key, just click on create a new key. So just name a key. So I'm saying this is weekend hyphen November. So this is just a name I'm using to the key pair. That means it is a combination of a lock and a key. Okay. And then format .pem only I need, because I'll be using OpenSSH. If you are using putty, you should use ppk, but highly recommend don't use ppk, just use pem. So don't even change anything, just click on create key pair. And then if you see, basically AWS is giving me my pem file. Okay. So basically this pem file is a key, but lock is already lock will be injected into your EC2 instance. Okay. So they gave me this particular key, so it is downloaded safely. So never share this key, because whoever will have this key, they can log in into your EC2 instance. Okay. Keep your key safe. And coming to the networking. Okay. So if you see, in the security group section, already it is asking you to create a security group, or else you can select an existing one. So let's not select an existing one, let's create a new one. And without even saying anything, if you see, already SSH traffic is allowed. Okay. So this is the default behavior already. In order to allow SSH communication, this traffic will be allowed by default. Okay. So if you need to open any other ports, you can open them later, or else you can open it right now. But I'm not opening any other ports. Okay. Except for SSH. Okay. Just scroll. So how much is the root storage you need? 8 GB. Okay. So you can use up to 30 GB. Okay. So which means I can consume this entire 30 GB for one VM, or else simply I can just use 10 for this, so that I can create two more, so that I'll stay in the free tier. Okay. That's it. In the advanced details, you don't have to do anything. Okay. So this is all not needed. Just click on launch instances. Okay. So first your security groups will be created, and then successful. If you want to see the launch log, okay, see everything is created. So this is the instance ID. Okay. You don't have to worry about this instance ID. Okay. So you can view all instances from here. Okay. Or else again, you can go back to your EC2 instance, EC2 service, and then click on the running instances. Okay. So these are all the running instances. If you want to see all stopped and everything, just remove this filter. Okay. So this will display all the instances. If you see, I have one Docker class VM. Okay. So what I will do is I'll try to first stop it. Okay. Just select this, click on instance type, and then stop it. Confirm. Okay. So this will just stop. This will not delete. Okay. Similarly, if you see, I have 4 stopped instances, and one which you just created Linux, which is in the running state. Okay. And also, if you want to get more information, you can just select this, and in the bottom, so you will see the instance ID, what is the public IP that is assigned, private IP that is assigned, public DNS, private DNS. Okay. So which version of instance you have used? You have used T2 micro. Okay. Because that is 1 GB 1 vCPU. Okay. And if you see, this is the AMI ID. Okay. The machine image ID. Okay. And you can see a lot of things here. And coming to the security tab, you will see that outbound rules. So outbound rules. Okay. So you are 1 second. So outbound rules, you are actually allowing everything. So from your VM, actually you can do anything. Okay. You can contact anything. But in the inbound rules section, if you see, only port 22 you are accepting. Okay. From anywhere. Okay. That means from anywhere in the world, from any IP address, you can access this VM on port 22. Okay. So if I mention some IP address like 1.1.1.1, which means I can only access this VM from the dedicated IP address. So that is an extra level of security. Okay. So that is the security tab. Coming to the networking, you can see networking related information. And then this is the storage related information. If you see, so we have 10 GB root volume that is used, and it is attached to our VM now. Status checks. So status checks are not completed. Okay, so this status checks will display whether your instance is healthy or not. Monitoring, it's the same thing. How much CPU is being utilized, how much memory is being utilized. Okay, so that real-time data will be shown. Of course, as soon as you create the instance, it will not be shown. It will need some time. And coming to the tags, so this is what we actually talked about. So if you see, we have created 2 tags. Okay, so using these tags, I can easily filter out, okay, certain VMs. Okay, this is again a metadata. Okay, clear? Or any questions? And also, so within this, you can also see instance type running, which instance you are using, okay, and in which zone you have launched. If you see, I launched in AP South 1B. Okay, so it is true because I'm in AP South 1. So within South 1 there are 3 data centers. Okay, 1A, 1B, and 1C. So it got launched in 1B automatically. Okay, and then this is the DNS IP. Okay, so a lot of things you can get information. Okay, so by chance, if you if you create in Mumbai and if you change to some other region, okay, your VMs will not be displayed. Okay, see here, I will not see any VMs here because I did not launch in this region. Okay, so you need to go back to your original region in which you have launched instances so that you can see the instances. So for now, we will stop this instance. Just select this, click on instance type and click on stop if you want to stop. If you want to delete it and recreate from beginning, you can terminate it. Okay, you can also reboot it. So for me, I'm just stopping it so that I'll start it again tomorrow, and I'll show you various ways of SSHing because that is very important. So in the last session, we talked about how to create the EC2 instances, right? So if you click on the running instances, if you see there are no running instances. So yesterday we created this instance and we stopped it. Okay, so in order to start it again, just select this VM and click on instance state and start. Okay, so it will take around 30 to 30 seconds to 1 minute. And once it is up, you will be able to see the public IP. Okay, but private IP is constant. Okay, so that's why you can see the private IP immediately, but public IP will take time. Like once the instance is started, you can see. So in order to refresh this particular page, you don't have to refresh this whole URL. You can simply click on this refresh button here, so it will refresh. And if you see, this Linux VM is running, and also this is the IP address. This is the public IP address, right? So now we'll see how to connect to EC2 instances using SSH. We'll also understand what is SSH. So there are many tools using which you can connect to EC2 instances. One is Putty. Okay, so this is an old tool. Okay, so if you want, you can use Putty. So otherwise, you can use some of the latest ones like MobaXterm. In fact, you can also use VS Code or your normal command prompt. And there are other tools like Tabby. Okay, you can use any of these, but in real time, you should only rely on the commands. Okay, because none of these tools will be used, right? Of course, in your local machine, you can still use them. But if you are already logged in into the server, and if you have to SSH into another server from that server, so you will not have any UI tools. So in that case, you need to rely on the commands itself. Okay. So let's see, how to use this putty. Basically, I won't use it, but I'll tell you how to use this. Okay. So first, you need to download this putty SSH client from this URL. Okay, or else you can go to putty.org and click on download, and then you have to download your 64-bit file for Windows. For the rest of the operating systems, I think putty is not supported. Okay, so it is supported only in Windows. I think you have to download the 64-bit and then you need to install it. Once it is installed, okay, so this is the UI. But the problem with this one is putty doesn't support whatever the file that we downloaded. Okay, so as I already said yesterday, so let me just confirm if there is any lag once I draw. Okay, till now, did you see any lag?
No.
So I'll come to SSH, how it works in some time. Okay, so basically, so whenever you create an instance, okay, so within AWS, so AWS creates two different files. So one is the public key, the other one is the private key. Okay, so if you are creating these for the first time, okay, what AWS will do is AWS will generate these two keys. So it will take the public key and it will put in the AWS EC2 instance which you are creating. Okay, and then they'll give you an option to download this private key. Okay, so this is what we downloaded yesterday. Okay, so this will be in the form of .pem file. Okay, right, whatever name that you use when downloading, so that name .pem will be the name of the file. So this is the private key. So this private key is private to the user. You should not share it to the share it to any user, or you should not upload it publicly into any repositories. And on the other hand, public key is public, anyone can have it. That means you can share this public key with anyone. Okay, so that's the reason why when AWS created this public key, it has simply put it in this in this server itself. Okay, so I'll tell you why this public key has to be placed in the server, and how these two keys are interrelated. I'll come to it today. Okay, so when you download this key, so AWS will give you two options. So one option is downloading the ppk file, the other is the pem file. Okay, so ppk is the, it is an old format. Okay, it is also a private key, and this is what supported by putty. Okay, but all the other tools supports pem format private key, right? So if you have already downloaded this pem file and if you still want to use putty, you need to convert pem file into ppk file. So for that, putty also gives you certain options here. Okay, so once you go to this putty key generator like this, so it will ask you to load that key. Okay, so once you load it, and once you load it, you will see your key here. So this is basically the pem file contents, and then it will give you an option to save private key. So this one will be saved as ppk file. Okay, so using this ppk file, you can log in with the putty into your EC2 instance. Okay, but how do you actually log in into the EC2 instance? So what is this public key, what is this private key? Okay, so let's understand about SSH. But before understanding SSH, so let's see a simpler option that is available to log in into your VM. Okay, so once you select your VM, so you have an option to connect here. So if you click on this connect, so there are various methods. So one is the EC2 instance connect, where your AWS will provide that service to directly log in into your server within the browser itself. Or else there is a session manager which we will not use. Third is the SSH client, that is clients like putty, MobaXterm, tabby. So they'll tell you what command to use. Okay, so this is the command. This is direct in-browser connection. So if you click on this option, automatically username will also be filled. Okay, so EC2 hyphen user is the default user. Let's say you created a different user in that VM, then you can enter your own username here. Okay, then automatically the instance public IP will be taken, and then once you click on connect, so it will open the SSH session into your VM. So this is happening directly in the browser itself. So if you see, I'm already in the EC2 instance. Okay, so this is the terminal, right? So here I can type any Linux commands. So if I have to look for IP address, okay, in Windows it is ipconfig, in Linux it is ifconfig. So if I type ifconfig, you can see my private IP. Okay, so you cannot see the public IP here from this output. So ifconfig is the private IP. So you can verify the same by going back to your instances, and once you select your Linux instance, okay, so you can see the IP here 208. The same you can see here 208. So this is entirely Linux terminal. So this is in browser. Okay, but in the browser level we will not use, because in most of the VMs, okay, in most of the machines we will not have any user interface. Okay, so we have to connect to these instances through SSH. Okay, direct commands. Okay, let's see how to SSH. So SSH stands for secure shell or secure socket shell. Okay. So the reason why it is called as a socket shell is because we are using both IP and port, and that too secure socket. Okay. So socket, as I said, it is IP colon port combination, right? And SSH itself is a application, right? It is a server application. That means within a VM, it should also listen on some port number, correct? Understood, guys? Guys, so
Yeah.
this is my EC2 instance, right? So I'm the user sitting somewhere. So I wanted to SSH. So if I have to SSH, so that SSH process should be running, right? Okay. So here, this user is known as client, and the process or the application becomes the server. So this is the SSH application running within the EC2 instance. Okay. So every EC2 instance which you create, by default, it runs SSH server. Okay. So this SSH server listens on port 22. I'll also show you this port number. Okay. So port 22. So here this client has to talk to this server on 22. But before reaching this server, so whatever request this user is initiating, that request has to go to that server first. So how do you identify the server? It is the IP of the server. Okay. And then, so if this request has to exactly reach this particular service, you should also mention the port number. That means IP colon port number is the socket. Okay. So this is the this uniquely identifies a particular application running in this VM. Okay. Clear, guys? Now, so how do you SSH and how do you authenticate yourself? So what is authentication? Okay. See, if I know this IP and this port number, so will I be able to log in into the server?
No, you need a username and the password.
Right. So I need username and password, because so without credentials I cannot log in. Okay. So here you need to understand two different terms. Of course, this is not needed for now. So there is a difference between authentication and authorization. Okay. So what is the difference between both? What is authentication? So what is authorization? So authentication is the login part. Okay. So it only checks whether a user has valid credentials or not. Understand? Clear, guys? For example, let's say, so there is this Amazon application. Okay. So this Amazon application, like let's say I have a user account. Okay. So I have a user account in this Amazon shopping app. Okay. So I am the user. So I can log in with my credentials, right? My username and my password. So when I log in, I can see my complete information, like my saved cards, my wish list, everything. Okay. So imagine there is also this customer care team. Okay. So I have some issues with my account. So I approach the CS team. So they wanted to look into my account. So they also will have access to my account, right? So in order to access that Amazon application, they'll also have their username and password. Correct? Right? So they logged in into my Amazon account. So the question is, will they be able to see my credit cards or debit cards information?
Yes.
No, no, they do not have that
It's no.
authority.
No.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So they can log in, but they're not authorized to see my personal details. Okay, it is their restriction. So their user account will not allow them to see my card's information, but my user account is authorized to see my own information. Okay, so this is the difference between authentication and authorization. Authentication means your system will check whether that particular user has valid credentials to log in into the system. Authorization means what that person can do after login. Okay, so will he able to create resources or delete some resources, modify resources? Okay, understand? So this is defined by authorization. Let's say I created a system. Okay, so I want full access to certain users. Okay, so there is a user X, so this user needs full permissions. Okay, so which means, so this is X user with his proper credentials. This part is known as authentication, this is known as authorization. So if a user X logs in into the system, he can do anything in the system, he has complete authorization. So there is this user Y who belongs to test team. He also has access to the system, but he is not authorized to do everything. He is authorized to see only, that is, he has only view permissions. So he cannot create, okay, he cannot modify, or he cannot delete anything. It is just a view permission for him. Okay,
Uh,
clear
they
guys?
can't do they can't do API operations. Yes.
Sorry.
They means he can't do the API operations like create, modify,
Yeah.
update.
Okay, so here these form of operations, right, they we call it as CRUD operations. Okay, so create, read, update, delete. Okay, so we will not give all four permissions to everyone. Okay, we will give only create permissions to some, we'll create only update permissions to some. Okay, we'll create delete permissions to some, but admin users will have all these permissions like create, delete, update, read. Okay, so this part is known as authorization. Remember, this is important. Authentication means whether that user is able to access that particular system or not. Okay, so this whole process is known as RBAC. Okay, so what is RBAC? Is role based authentication. Okay, so this is role based authentication, which means, so depending upon the role, we'll also decide what that user can do. Okay, clear guys? So we'll come back to the authentication part. Okay, so the authentication means user should be able to log in. Okay, now come to the login part. So how a user can log in into the system? Hmm? So of course you'll have username, right, plus password, right? Understood?
Yes, Vikram.
Right, so user can have, so in order to log in, so you'll basically have username and password. So one issue with this password is, passwords are relatively, less secure, and also they are, very easy to crack. I mean, in many cases people will try to use very weak passwords like admin123, or any some very easy to, crack passwords. Okay, and also these are not time bound. Not time bound means, so once a user creates them, okay, so in many cases he will not change it. Okay, or he will try to use the same password for multiple accounts. Okay, and also password length is very small. Okay, so in many cases they'll ask you to create anywhere from 8 to 15 characters, which means, so it is also not that complex. Okay, so username and password are still used to log in into any system, but you should always try to use a different method for login instead of password, I mean username and password. Okay, so what is the other alternative? So the other alternative is you use your username plus a token. Okay, so what is a token? So for time being, you can take password is nothing but a token. But what is this token is, this token is time bound. Okay, so what is this time bound is, so whenever I create a token which is nothing but which is exactly equal to password, but it is not the password, and also it's what do you say, the data is not password. Okay, so token can be like 127 characters, it can be large number of characters. Okay, or it can be 15 to 20. Okay, I'm not talking about the length of the token, but what is this token is, using token you will be able to log in, but this token has time limit. Okay, so whenever I create a token, I'll say that this token should expire in 24 hours. Okay, which means within the 24 hours, if anyone wants to log in, so they'll simply enter this as username and they'll treat token as the password, so they'll be able to log in into the system. Okay, but after 24 hours this token gets expired, which means they need to create a new token for login. Understood? Clear, guys?
Yes,
And
Vikram.
tokens are very hard to crack because token length will be very high. Okay, like 127 characters, more than 100 characters, so it is not easy. Okay, and also it is time bound, it is more secure. Okay, and also here you can restrict what this token can do, like a person got access to your token. Okay, so what a user can do, so simply when I'm creating this token, I'll also say that a user with this token can only do read operations within my system. Okay, that means even though if my token is compromised, they can see my information, they cannot delete, modify, or they cannot do anything with the token, because the token is not authorized to do any other operations other than read operations. Okay, so in either of these cases, user is forced to either use password or token. Okay, so is there any way I can still log in into the system without any token or password? So this is also known as passwordless authentication. Okay, it is a passwordless authentication. So what is this passwordless authentication? Okay, so let's see, in case of EC2 instance only. So I have this server EC2. Okay, so I need to log in into this machine, so I know that I can use username and password, or password or token, whatever it is, but I don't want to every time use the password, because password is a manual activity. That means a user has to use the keyboard to actually enter the password. Okay, but I don't want to use it. So whenever a user enters a command, he should be automatically login into the system. Okay, how it is achieved? So it is achieved to passwordless authentication. Here I will create two files. Okay, so one is called as a public key. Okay, usually it is called as a lock also, and there is a private key. Okay, so user will have a public and private key. So I'll generate this key pair. What I will do is I'll take this public key lock or key, then I lock my EC2 instance. Okay, I locked it. Now how will I unlock it? I'll use my private key. So if I have my private key with me, I can easily SSH into my machine, because the equivalent lock, which is also known as public key, is available in this VM. Okay, so why I used public here? So the reason why I gave this a public is, so I can give this key to anyone. In fact, I can take another VM, okay, and I can put my lock here. So even if this VM is compromised, okay, so someone got root access to this VM and they took my key. That is, see, key is nothing but it is a file only. It has some content. Okay, it is not like it is an actual lock. It is some value, data. Okay, someone got my data, but what they can do with that data? They can't do anything, right? Because the private key is with me. Understood? And with public key, they cannot regenerate the private key back. And if they got the private key, they cannot regenerate the public key. It's not possible. Okay. So if they have to log in into the system, they should know which public key they have used, and they should also use the same private key. Okay. Clear. So with public key, you cannot generate your private key. With private key, you cannot generate your public key. So where this private key
Vikram,
will exist? Yeah.
I mean, like using puttygen, can't we load the private key and generate a public key?
Now that load operation is to convert.
Okay. I mean,
Okay.
using a private key can't we like get a public key?
No, that operation is not there.
Okay.
Okay, so this private key will reside in your own system. So in your laptop, it will be there. So there is a defined location. Okay, so this private key will be there in one certain location, that is standard location. Even the public key should be copied at a standard location. You cannot copy into some random location. So there are some standard locations. So your SSH protocol, okay, when it is trying to use the private key to log in into reset instance, okay, so it will check the equivalent public key from a standard location. Okay, so I'll tell you about those standard location. Okay, so now SSH I can do it in two ways. So I can use username and password, but if I use username and password, so this password can be compromised. Okay, so that's the reason why what I'll use is I'll use my private key. Okay, so these keys are not very small. Okay, so these are very larger in sizes. So using private key is the standard method, and it is also most secure method, right? Clear, guys? Let's see how to use password based authentication and how to use passwordless authentication. Okay, so this passwordless authentication which we discussed, that is using public and private keys, is called public key authentication. Okay, the name itself is called public key authentication. Okay, you can do SSH both with passwords as well as without any passwords. Okay, and also the data between the both client and server is encrypted. Okay, and by default SSH runs on port 22. Okay, so this port 22 is a standard one, and of course you can also change it. Many organizations internally change the SSH port number to some other value. Okay, just to secure their servers. Otherwise it is, if no one is giving that port number, it is always 22. Okay, now let's see how to use SSH based authentication using you know uh, IP and your username and password. It is very easy. So if you are on Windows or if you are on Linux or Mac, so SSH will be installed by default. Okay, so OpenSSL is the library, so that is installed by default in all the machines. Okay, and the way to invoke SSH is SSH, and since we don't know anything, so once you press SSH and click on enter, so you will be shown with all the help commands like how to use. Okay, or else I think -h is also one option. So -h is not known. Let's see -help. Even this is also known. Okay, so one thing you need to remember is that every command will have its own help section or documentation. Okay, so this documentation can be accessed in two ways. So -help after the command. So whatever command you enter, space -help will show the help section of that particular command. Or basically, you can also short form, which is -h. Okay, so do you know what are these calls? These are called,
Parameters, argument parameters.
so these are called flags. Okay, so -help is a full flag, -h is a short flag. Okay, so for every a flag, let's say if they give you -config is the full flag, so they'll also give you equivalent short flag like -c. Okay, so instead of doing -config every time, you can use the short form. Okay, so they'll give you, I'll show you in many tools they have it. Okay, So let's see how to use SSH. Here help section is not so good in Windows, but if you try to do the same in Linux, you will see a lot of other options. Okay, so now let's understand how to do SSH. Okay, so I'm simply searching because I would like you to search from beginning itself. So how to SSH, how to use SSH in Windows, Linux, so you can take anything. So they'll show you both password based authentication and passwordless based authentication. So if you are interested in using putty, so they'll give you how to use putty and all this, so you can use. Okay, and also if you are coming from Linux, they'll also show you how to use this. Okay, so let me quickly, since I know everything, so I'll directly show you. So SSH. Okay, so when you're trying to SSH, okay, so what is the identity that you should use? How do you identify yourself and how do you identify the server? Okay, so I identify myself with my username and I identify server with its IP address. Okay, so these are the only two things I know. So I know the username of my EC2 instance is EC2-user, that is a standard name. Okay, and also um, how do I give the IP address? Okay, how do I join them? So if I go back to my EC2 instance, so this is the public IP. Just copy the public IP from here and then paste it. Okay, but so if I enter this command like this, will it work? It won't work. So the syntax is username at the rate of IP address. Okay, so what is this SSH here?
Utility? Yes.
Hmm? SSH is the command. Okay, but SSH here it is called as a client utility. Okay, because you are talking to the server should able to understand. So here once you install anything, its client tool will be installed. Okay, so here SSH is the SSH client tool. Okay, SSH, you're using your user account at the rate of the remote IP. Okay, so if you type enter, it will throw an error because so just type yes in this case. So it will not allow you. Okay, the reason why it will not allow you is, so once you enter this command, okay, so basically what your server expects is, so the server expects a password in the next line. Okay, so you enter your username and you entered your IP address. So the next line it will ask you to enter your password. But why it is not asking you to enter your password is, as I said, password based authentication is, what did I say? Authentication is disabled. Understood? It is not enabled in your EC2 instances. That's why it is not even asking you to enter password. Of course, you can enable it if there is any use case. Until you enable it, your password will not be asked. That's why in the output it is showing you permission denied. Okay, so when the password method is disabled, so what it will do is it will try to basically authenticate with your private key. Okay, clear? So it will look for your private key from a standard location, but unfortunately I don't have my private key at that standard location. Okay, getting my point? So how do I give my private key? So it is using -i. If I just show the help section of this SSH, somewhere it is shown -i means identity file. So what is your identity? Your identity is your private key, right? Because public key is already available in your EC2 instance. Clear? So where is my private key? So where did you download it yesterday? So that is your location of your private key. Clear? Clear, guys? So in my case, basically I stored it here, and I think I stored it with weekend November .pem as the key. So what I'll do is I'll just click on this address bar here. Okay, just delete everything and then type cmd in Windows. So your command prompt will be opened at that exact location. So I'm already in the keys directory. All right, clear guys? So I'm already in the keys directory. Now what I'll do is, I know SSH EC2-user is the name of my EC2 instance, and this is the IP, and I will give my identity file, which is weekend DevOps. Okay, so it deleted the rest of the things again. It's okay, I'll write it again. Clear guys? So basically I'm already in that same path. I'm directly giving the file name. So if you're in a different path, you should give the full path. Okay, so now if I try to enter, okay, it is saying permission denied. So why it is permission denied? Weekend DevOps.pem. Okay, so let me see with what is the private key which I used. Okay, once you select your VM, okay, and then if you go to this security, one second, not security, in the details only, it will give you what is the name. Okay, so it is weekend November, so the key name should be weekend November. I think I'm using the, okay, I'm using a different one. I should use the one which is this one. Okay, now try to enter. See what happened? What happened guys?
You log into the server.
I'm logged into my EC2 instance. Okay, so now I'm not in my Windows, I'm in my EC2 instance. Okay, if I try to use Windows based command, it will throw an error. So the Linux based command to fetch the IP is ifconfig. See, I'm in my EC2 instance. So if I click on exit, I'll be back to my Windows. Okay, again if I have to sign in, I mean login, SSH-i, your identity file. Okay, your username at the rate of your public IP address. That's it. Okay, and then exit. Once you're done, exit. Clear guys? Okay, so every time typing this location and also typing the IP address, your username, it's very difficult for me. Okay, because every time running the command to login. So what is the other alternative way? Okay, so I can use many tools like Tabby for all three operating systems, or MobaXterm for Windows. Okay, we will see how to install MobaXterm on Windows. So MobaXterm is one of the best SSH client available for Windows operating system. It also provides other utilities like X11 server, RDP, VNC, and other networking tools, and it also offers much more. Unfortunately, this is not available for Mac or Linux operating system. So in this video, we'll see how to install it on Windows, and we'll see how this is better than other SSH clients. So MobaXterm is a single application that provides various utilities like SSH client, X11 server, RTP, VNC, FTP, and Unix-like environment. So we can run Unix-like commands in the Windows operating system like ls, pwd, etc. to navigate our file system. MobaXterm comes in two flavors. One is the home edition and the one is the professional edition. We'll be using home edition as it is free. So let's see how to install it on Windows and how to use it. So I'm in Chrome browser, so I can just type for MobaXterm download. Then I can visit the first link, which is an official link. Then I can select the home edition because it is completely free. There is one more edition which is professional edition, but it is chargeable. So for this demo, I'll be using home edition. Then click on download button over here. So we'll be having two variants. One is the portable edition and the other one is the installer edition. So I'll be using the installer edition. So in order to download it, just click on this button over here. So in my case, I've already downloaded it and unzipped it. So this is the installer, which is a zip format. So once you extract it, so there will be an executable file. Just double click on this executable file to install it. So just click on next, accept the license agreement, then next. So let's keep everything in default. So now the installation is successful. Click on finish. So now go to Windows Spotlight search, or else you can also directly search for MobaXterm. So it is being prepared for the first time usage. So let's see how MobaXterm is better when compared to other SSH utilities. Okay, so in my case it is the theme is selected as black. So you can also select the white UI over here by clicking on this. So what I'll do is, so once my MobaXterm is installed, since you guys know how to install, okay, so I'll open this UI. Okay, so by default you will not have all these folders, so let me delete all these folders. Okay, so it will be like plains like this. Okay, what I'll do is I'll create sessions. Okay, so whenever I click on that session, automatically internally this particular command will be executed and I'll be logged in into my system. Okay, so I don't want to arrange all my sessions like this. I want to arrange sessions in the form of folders. Okay, first thing I'll do is I'll click on right click here and click on folder, and then I'll just say AWS. So all my AWS related sessions I'll store it here. And MobaXterm will support lot of sessions. So if you click on the session here, it will support SSH, Telnet, RSH, remote desktop connections, virtual networking, file transfer protocol, SFTP, serial connections, file transfer. So there are a lot of things. Even you can access your AWS S3 buckets, Windows subsystem for Linux. Okay, this is the only tool that is required for all these protocols. Okay, but we are interested in SSH. Okay, just close this here. Okay, so you can start your SSH session by clicking on SSH here. Then it will ask for various things. Since I'm trying to arrange everything in form of folders, and I created this folder, select this folder, right click and click on new session. Okay, so inside the session I'll select SSH. What is the remote host? So the remote host is the IP. Okay, so you can only identify the host using IP addresses unless there is a DNS, and specify the username. Just check this. So what is the default username? It is EC2-user. Okay, so two things are done. So what is the what are the other things that are missing? So what are the other things that I need to
Private
log in
key.
into my VM? So private key. So where do I select the private key automatically? So I can go to this advanced SSH, use private key, check this option, and then just give your location. I mean, just load that key. So weekend November PEM. See here it is done. Okay, so once I save it, so here see I'm automatically logged in. So I'm already in the system. So if I zoom in, I'm already in. So I can just close this here, and then see here this is the session. Just double click on the session, automatically I will be logged in. Okay, just close it, it will exit. Okay, but here exposing my IP addresses and the username, I don't feel very secure. I'll right click here. Okay, if I have to make any changes, I can go to this edit. Again, if the host IP is changed, I can set here username, and these keys will remain same, but I want to give this session a name. Okay, so go to bookmark, and here in the session name delete everything. Since this is a Linux VM, okay, so what I'll do, I'll put it as Linux, just a friendly name. Okay, so now this name is visible, just click on it. I'll be logged into that particular VM. Okay, and then you can also of course use exit and all. So automatically that session will be terminated. You can click on you can close that. All the recent sessions will be visible here. You can also just click on that, it will be there. Okay, similarly, if you have to create another session, just right click on the AWS folder, click on new session, and the same. Okay, so what if the IP of the server changes after restart? Okay, so what you can do is you can right click, edit the session, give your new IP address, and then save it. That's it. So once you click on this button, okay, you will be logged in automatically. Okay, so this is the best method in order to quickly log in and log out from your remote servers.